Music is repetitive. It is a pattern based on a motif going in a spiral with variations scattered throughout. In essence, it mimics our reality. Wake up, seize the day, go to sleep, repeat, until we slowly fade into silence. This is inherently what attracts us to music. What if I told you that music, specifically classical, is an art form that is the least based on mere repetition or imitation, and perhaps is the closest we will ever get to the truth with a capital T? What if with classical music and with it alone, we actually managed to arrive at the very nature of being itself? In this video, I will talk about Arthur Schopenhauer's fascinating philosophy of music, demonstrate his theory in practice, and try to wrestle with the possibility that humanity peaked with classical music. Music is a universal language, or so the cliché goes, but we take it for granted how ingrained it is in our lives. There has been a raging war happening in the past century, one we rarely notice, between silence and music, and it is clear who the victor is. The constant, infinite beating rhythm of music has permeated our planet. We walk with headphones, we drive with the radio, we clean, we study, we work, we make love, celebrate birthdays, mourn funerals, perform surgeries, and everything else under the sun, accompanied by the sound of music. But the most interesting part of me is how we instinctively rely on music to balance out our hopelessness or nihilism. In times of intense despair, we blast music or go to places where music is blasted and tune out, but I think it is much deeper than that. With music, we seek more than to merely go numb. Rather, I think we depend on it to transcend ourselves. For brief moments, it portals us out of our subjective troubles or limitations, and we enter a realm of beauty, melody, rhythm, or in meta terms, disinterested neutrality. And I will get back to this, but I cannot help but see a correlation between the exponential invasion of music into our lives and the unceasing nihilism of our times. Yet we arrive at a crucial question. How can we understand this unmatched significance and effect of music? Enter the pessimist Arthur Schopenhauer. He was a rare philosopher who truly tried to wrestle with the meaning of music and wrote extensively about it. He claimed that music was the deepest art form above painting or writing. Quote, "The effect of music is so very much more powerful and penetrating than it is that of the other arts, for these others speak only of the shadow, but music of the essence." You see, Schopenhauer built his metaphysics on the concept of the irrational will to live, an blind, incessant impulse that drives all existence. This will lies at the foundation of reality, the world as it is in itself. In this view, we humans do not live in reality, but in the appearances and representations of this will, in the world as idea. As you can see, Schopenhauer accepted the distinction between the truthful world and as it appears to us in representation. However, Schopenhauer believed we are able to glimpse beyond these representations, and this is the key to understanding the significance of music. Rather than representing the will through indirect means as depictions of its real-world manifestations, Schopenhauer believed that music was a direct manifestation of the will itself. It is incomparable to any other art forms because it alone is an expression of itself rather than a copy or repetition. In other words, music exists for its own sake. It is a thing in itself. Quote, "The inexpressible depth of all music, by virtue of which it floats past us as a paradise quite familiar and yet eternally remote, and is so easy to understand and yet so inexplicable, is due to the fact that it reproduces all the emotions of our innermost being, but entirely without reality and remote from its pain." End quote. And here we can start to grasp why music mattered so much to Schopenhauer. You see, he wrestled with the nature of suffering deeply his whole life. The will to live, thought Schopenhauer, is an unquenchable thirst, an endless cycle of desire and suffering, and happiness is merely temporary relief from that circle of doom. However, not all is hopeless. One of the paths of transcendence he outlined was aesthetic contemplation. Since music, in his view, is a pure expression of the will, for a human to truly engage with it means to temporarily shed the subjective desires, enter a sort of will-less state of observation, and experience being in its objective form. And this brings me back to my earlier question of using music to portal out of ourselves in a way nothing else does. For Schopenhauer, the reason and the answer is metaphysical. Music doesn't distract us or tune us out. Rather, it reveals what the world is truly made of. Via this portal of music, we leave temporality and touch on the eternal. Quote, "The true work of art leads us from that which exists only once to that which exists perpetually and time and again in innumerable manifestations. Notes bypass the phenomena representation and embodies the fundamental innermost being. Whereas other arts inescapably deal with shadows by being limited to words, colors, or material, the nature of music allows for direct access to the essence. So any given masterful composition expresses not a joy or a sorrow, but the joy and sorrow. It is in this way that it is objective. Of course, Schopenhauer was a transparent thinker and readily admits that his metaphysical conception of music as the embodiment of will cannot be logically demonstrated. Evidence can only be provided by the comparative analysis of the parallel constitution of music and the world as representation. And this is exactly what I will try to do. Before we begin, at least one crucial question remains. Why classical music? Of course, this question can be waved away with a matter of taste, or to do it more justice, we could discuss that it stood the test of time without a hint of rust. But instead, I will simply try to show you, and hopefully the answer will manifest itself without being explicitly put into words. You see, for the whole time when writing this video, I try to figure out which composition to use for this analysis. An obvious answer would be one of the greats, say Mozart's Requiem, but ultimately I decided on this. Yes, this is it. A simple violin accompanied by a piano. This is Tchaikovsky's Valse Sentimentale. For context, it is not even close to his most important work, The Swan Lake or The Nutcracker, and Tchaikovsky himself, although obviously great, was not regarded as an avant-garde, innovative, and groundbreaking composer, and is precisely why I chose him as an example of classical music's greatness. This relatively simple piece features a stunning moment which I want to show you. As you can hear, the structure of the composition is familiar. A single motif is being played in a growing pattern with its most dramatic and complex variation coming at the very end. On itself, it would be enough. A dramatic climax of a short composition would work and we could move on. But Tchaikovsky does you one better. The violin grows so powerful in its beauty, so powerful perhaps like never before, so much so that it immediately retreats backwards as if terrified by its own beauty. Wow is all I can muster up. However, let's try to break it down without robbing its meaning. Who among us was not lucky enough at least once in their lives to be mesmerized by beauty to the point of trembling fear? The first love, the first kiss, the song of your life heard for the first time. I could go on for an hour fitting various aspects of existence into this single moment of a single piece from a single composer can encompass. And that is enough said, but as a parallel comparison to better understand what I'm getting at, let's take the myth of Medusa as an example. She's a fascinatingly deep symbol of beauty. Contrary to the kitsch beauty we might think of today where it is purely good, this wise myth portrays beauty as something that is terrifying to others, but also dangerous to bear. Thus, Medusa, an outstandingly beautiful mortal, became a target to a god, and as punishment was transformed to have snake hair and turn to stone anyone daring to look at her. Well, is this not what happens on earth between women and unworthy, insufficient men? Who among us boys has not lost the ability to speak, at least intelligently, when faced with a mesmerizing woman? Beauty is terrifying because it shines forth with unbearable immediacy the blinding truth of our existence, and with the same light exposes our own inadequate darkness. But why focus on Medusa? Is not in this single moment of a single piece from a single composer represented Helena from Goethe's Faust, or how about Dorian Gray from Oscar Wilde, or the Sirens from Homer's Odyssey? What about Nietzsche's and Schopenhauer's praise of Greek tragedies, for they are beautiful because they are terrifying and tragic? Did Rilke not write of this same idea, quote, "Beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror we are still just able to bear"? What about Rita in Mulholland's Drive or Hitchcock's Vertigo? And how can we forget Lady Lilith, Nuda Veritas, or Madonna? Across myths, literature, fine arts, philosophy, and film, the same archetype repeats. My question is, do not all of these great works and countless more represent the same source idea? And at the same time, is the unfathomable ability of a few seconds of a violin being able to express this essence, this truth, not the monument to the unmatched classical music's greatness? Is this violin not the peak of humanity's greatness and at the same time the prophet of its frightened retreat? Quote, "Science will teach us to fly among stars, but who will teach us to love?" End quote. This is taken from an obscure Lithuanian Soviet-era writer, but it encapsulates my preoccupation with classical music. Knowingly or not, I think many of us living in modern, progressive, and secular societies are desperately searching for meaning beyond us. Intuitively, I cannot help but dig around in the past in hopes of rediscovering forgotten treasure. My intention with this video was not to knock on other art forms in elitist fashion, but rather to put classical music on a pedestal as an exhibit of such treasure and share with you what I find so meaningful about it. And I fully understand the paradox of using words to try to explain something that is beyond words, but at least I can use them to point at the direction I'm looking at. I always loved music, but with discovering Chopin, Liszt, or Sibelius, and of course all the other greats, life somehow became more tolerable and perhaps even possible to embrace, as Nietzsche so vehemently demanded. Flowers suddenly bloom regardless